Quick Newton and the Northside for me was community. Growing up, my grandma's house, it was yard sales every other weekend. You know, I tell my wife the ice cream, the paleta man would be ringing his bell through the neighborhood. You know, they would come through with shopping carts and honk their horns and sell us elotes, and it was just that sense of community. Like I said, your neighbor would be on the same baseball team or the same basketball team as you. You know, your other friend down the street, she would be good at math and would be able to help you with your math homework before Monday. It was just that whole sense of community.
We lived on Wolf Street and on 13th and Wolf, so that was part of North High School. And there was a special bus, it was a 64 bus that picked us up at a specific time before school started. And all of us, we're all Jewish, and we're getting on this bus that's taking us to North.
North is the rock of the neighborhood. It is the high school that everybody feeds into. In my day, we had 3 major middle schools that fed into it. We called them junior highs. And North is where we solidified the community. It will always be that to me.
I am Brandy Archuleta, born and raised in Denver, Colorado. This is Jim Vigil, close family friend, and the person that ran the rec center for a very, very long time. And he's raised generations and generations of youth in the neighborhood, and it really was his life's mission to make it a cultural hub for all of the people in his community.
What was attractive about this area has always been the Latino nature of the thing. West 32nd Avenue was what Welton Street was to Five Points in terms of the local businesses that catered to Latinos, the panaderias, the video stores, the estelistas, the Holiday Theater.
The Holiday Theater was a theater I used to go to back in the day. When I was 9 and 10 years old, we watched double features on Saturday morning. We are at 2616 West 32nd Avenue at Taqueria Pátzcuaro, a restaurant that opened on West 32nd Avenue in 1978. The first taqueria in Denver.
Back in the day, I mean, it was a reasonable place to live as far as, rent, mortgage. The housing was affordable, and they just loved the community. It was a pretty tight community back in the day. It's changed a lot since then.
Family, everything revolved around family, and family ties, and associationship with family, relatives, cousins, friends. So you asked about good, bad, the ugly. It was all pretty good because we all knew each other and we were all in the same boat, so to speak.
This block, growing up here was very rich, living with the Italian community, and growing up at a time when Little Italy was alive and thriving. It was wonderful, the best food, the best wines, the best bread, the best drama with the small domes.
The Italian lady from down the block walk by and just check out the garden and say hello and tell me what was happening with each and every neighbor. She would make the rounds, and then she was like the city block town crier. She told everybody everything. And so if you didn't want something shared, you better not tell Tina, because her real name was Santina. So you better not tell Tina, because she'll go spread it all around the block. And it was being able to walk down to West 32nd Avenue and pick up not only the panaderia, but maybe go to a Mexican movie, maybe listen to some really top shelf talent from Mexico sing, and then go to a protest or to hear Cesar Chavez over at Guadalupe Church.
We would be, hey, what are you gonna do today? You know what I'm saying? Oh, you're gonna go swimming? You're gonna go play basketball? Where are you gonna be? Where are you gonna be at? Who's with you? Okay, let me jump on my bike, I'll be right there. It was that sense of community.
This is a photo of the 4 women who helped to start KUVO Radio. We initially started from my home and eventually moved to different studio spaces. We have myself, Veronica Gallegos in the back row, and Dolores Atencio in the front row, and Mercedes Hernandez, my sister, who was the program director, in the front row. KUVO still exists. It's at 89.3 FM, and I hope you'll listen to it.
You know, the Northside was a very diverse community. There were a lot of Latinos living in the area, Chicanos and Central Americans. But there was also Italians and a sizable Eastern European community too. But the Northside drew us in because of that diversity, because of that feel of a community.
It was a mix of Italian and Latino. Pretty much everybody was a working class community.
It wasn't just Chicanos, it wasn't just blacks, it wasn't just Asians, we had everybody.
It felt like a great mix of people, because it wasn't just the Jewish kids, and there were a lot of us, but it was the Italians. At that time, there weren't as many Hispanic. There were several Japanese kids. And then there were like wealthy whites and poorer whites. And it was a really nice mix of personalities and ethnicities, religions. So you made friends with all these people.
Well, you know, back in those days there was a lot of little gangsters around, you know.
Well, actually, my mother was the housekeeper for the Small Dome, so I got to be pretty much an Italian Mexican Chicano.
The Small Domes owned Gitanos. Yeah, they did a lot of booking and things like that out of there.
We are at 38th and Newton Street at Carl's. Carl's is owned now by John Ludwig, who bought the business from Carl DiGiacomo back in the 80s, I believe. Great pizza, great place, great gathering place in North Denver.
Well, let's see, Carl would pull up in his Cadillac Coupe de Ville across the street. He'd come in. We had Joe Briola. He used to like to sit right here. He used to play cards in the back room. He was a collector for the Small Domes. Oh yeah, you know, we'd have the cops in the front room and the crooks in the back room.
My family knew all of those people, and I knew them as well. And if you knew them as members of the community, that was just their job, and you didn't associate with what they did. And that was totally separate. Their wives half the time didn't know what they were doing. That was just the family business. So no, there really wasn't a pushback. It was just, you don't get involved with those underworld kinds of things. It's not legal. That was the prevailing attitude.
I was a Valkyrie, which was the pep club, and we all wore purple skirts with gold button-down shirts, just shirts, and we had gold jacket with or a purple jacket with gold piping on it, and we wore loafers with gold socks and so on. And we went to all the games. We went to the football games, we went to the basketball games, and often after or usually before a game, we would eat at the Old Mexican Cafe. And it was the best Mexican food. It was wonderful Mexican food. And that was, you know, we went with our girlfriends who grew up on the North Side.
That was the sense of community that we had. You know what I mean? It didn't matter your skin color, didn't matter where your heritage was from. What mattered was that you were here in the North Side with us.
My name is John Marsico. This is a photograph of my 8th grade graduation from St. Patrick's Grade School. The school is located on 34th and Pecos. These were 8th grade students. As you can see by the photograph, it's a diversity of people, and it shows that it was a very good, interesting, equal community.
Not too far from here are 3 Catholic churches within a few blocks of each other. And I like to point out that there's Mount Carmel, St. Patrick's, and Our Lady of Guadalupe. So you can tell, I mean, within a small area, the three Catholic churches catered to different aspects of the community as it existed at that time. So it was very much a mix.
We are at the corner of 33rd and Pecos at St. Patrick's Church, the old mission church. This congregation was founded in 1907. This church was built in 1907 and served an Irish-American population.
There were a lot of celebrations, different kinds of holidays, you know, from the Italian festivities to what the Latinos were doing, and then everything in between.
Well, St. Rocco's feast was a large procession that would carry the statue of St. Rocco, who was the patron saint of Potenza. They would bid on that statue in the front of this church for the honor of carrying this statue through the streets. At the end of that bidding process, that statue was in a long procession around this street, then benediction afterwards, and then followed by the feast at they usually used the parking lot at Potenza Lodge on 38th and Shosho.
Now we are at the corner of 36th and Navajo at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. This church served and still serves the Italian community. Again, there is a Mass done here in Italian still, and that is the 10 o'clock Mass every Sunday.
That's why we are parishioners of this church. There hasn't been a Sunday in years that have gone by where I haven't been at Mass with one or two classmates, a first cousin, or two first cousins, whatever. So it brings me back here weekly. I can't speak for anybody else, but I do know people who are very active in the men's club here because that allows them to maintain their North Denver traditions.
We are at the corner of 36th and Kellerman at Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a beautiful church. And this church was built in 1947. This congregation serves the Hispanic American population and Hispanos, and it has masses in both English and Spanish.
This is 3 Guadalupes at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, and I wanted to show this photograph because the mural that was painted by Carlota Espinosa it was so much part of our community in the north side, but it got covered over by a wall, and so nobody can really see it. There is a group of women, Guadalupeans, who go behind the wall and they pray the rosary. And hopefully someday we will be able to see that mural again. Maybe the wall will be torn down, but at least the painting itself still exists.
Guadalupe Church was, to me, the central place to go, whether Cesar Chavez came to visit and he spoke at Guadalupe Church Hall, or whether Father Lara was, encouraging people to act with justice for everybody.
My name is Tim Hernandez, and this is my photo from May 13th, 2022, where hundreds of students walked out of North High School in protest of having more teachers of color, more Chicano teachers, ethnic studies classes, and Chicano studies classes. And it connects to our neighborhood historically because 50 years ago, high school students that looked just like us walked out just like us and took over streets just like us.
We were very active in community projects, and the Northside was a real hotbed of political activity back then. Primarily, I talk about the Chicano movement, the Chicano civil rights movement that was going on across the Southwest. But in Denver, the Crusade for Justice and the Mexican-American students on campus, were really very active in agitating for equality, voting rights, education, better jobs, healthcare, all the basic things that we still hear about today. And here in the Northside, there were very active community groups and a lot of activity going on in terms of protest marches, dissent, civil disobedience, something like the naming the park from Columbus Park to La Raza Park. You know, that was recently successfully concluded, but that particular struggle started 50 years ago.
We're at La Raza Park at 38th and Osage Street. And this park has a lot of historical meaning. This park was first dedicated by the Italian American community and given to the city. It was known then as Columbus Park. But as the world changes and demographics change, this park became a true symbol of the Chicano movement.
That's where we hung. You know, that's where we grew up. That was our PlayStation. That's where we got engaged. That's where we did a whole lot of good and bad things. And I started to say, you know, we need to rename this park. Look what they did at Lincoln Park. You know, so we worked with City Council, Parks and Rec, tried to work with them. They laughed at us. They didn't take us serious. We didn't have any political power. And then after 6 months, you know, in the early spring, we said, we're not getting anywhere. So we made a plan. We made a plan that on June the 20th, 1970, we got together demands for employment, the renaming of the park, maintenance of the park, police issues. So I said, you know, a peaceful way to do this would be a splash-in. My plan was to go in, meet, march at the pool, 1 o'clock, they open the doors, we're gonna bum rush it. And we're gonna occupy the pool. We're not gonna come out until our demands are discussed. 3.5 hours later, the cops came, the frogmen came, you know, and they're trying to get us out of the pool. We were able to negotiate after 3.5 hours, and we vacate the pool. And we had set a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning at Parks and Rec, and so we marched. You know, over 100 of us, community people. But it was leadership from the neighborhood, and that's one thing I'm really proud of, is that these youth stood up for something that they learned to believe in, even if they were the only ones standing.
It can be very traumatic for somebody who's grown up in this neighborhood or lived in the neighborhood for decades like we have, when you see that the history of the neighborhood is being forgotten, that diverse culture that we talked about before, the activities that were going on, the community nature of the neighborhood, you know, all of that is slipping away. You know, change is inevitable no matter where you live, and things are going to change in the neighborhood. But it's really been drastic here in this part of the city.
Instead of neighborhood, we called our neighborhood barrios, which is the same thing. Sometimes the term barrio got a negative connotation, but it really meant a place where families lived, children grew, and people prospered.
I grew up in a subdivision, which is not as neighborhood rich as a true blocked type of community like North Denver is. And so I love walking around the neighborhood and waving at the neighbors and knowing who your neighbors are, and why I like North Denver and why I like this part of the neighborhood.
You could see these intersections, these blocks, these neighborhoods where the barbershops, the bars, butcher shops used to be, and they've all been converted to either microbrews or restaurants.
Yeah.
But if you need to get a haircut, if you need a pound of nails, you have to leave your neighborhood.
I am part of this new guard of people moving to Denver for whatever reason, right? But I care about the neighborhood. I care about the North Star newspaper, and I read that on my front porch, you know, every month when it comes out. And so I think I recognize the change, and I want to be a part of preserving the history of it. Whether that's naming more parks after local heroes of the neighborhood, or putting more plaques up on corners of street. I think we can do more to help preserve the neighborhood, because things are going to change. It's inevitable.
Okay, I agree. Change is a part of nature, but we could be that change agent that helps guide that change. That's one of the things that's missing, because throughout the history of North Denver, Chicanos have been left out of that change. So you mentioned earlier you saw some folks with picket signs at La Raza Park. That's being an active part of the change. That's being part of the community that says we want our voices heard.
How do you think the older communities, or the Chicano community and the newer community, can help bridge those efforts here in North Denver?
It's twofold. It's incumbent upon the old residents to inform the new residents about the history. Likewise, it's incumbent upon the new residents to have the thirst to understand and seek out the knowledge of that history.
You passing on this to me hits me in a different way, you know? And so I can pass this on and to the people after me, but I guess that's how I would end it.
Well, let's keep open minds, huh?
Yeah, I agree.